We'll get started. Call to order, roll call. Nathan Bertram, I'm here. Jeff?
Yep.
Mary? Here. Janelle? Janet?
Here.
Jan, sorry.
That's okay.
Doug?
I'm here.
All right. Looking for a motion for approval of agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like to have an amendment to the, I'm sorry. I want the minutes. No, never mind.
I'll move the agenda as submitted.
No second.
First and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes. Approval of minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like to have an addition to the minutes reflecting that meeting was called to order by Doug, because there's nothing noted there who called the order, who called the meeting to order.
All right. I think that could be made in the first line there. Any other additions or amendments to the minutes? If not, I would look for.
Move to approve with the amendment.
Perfect.
Second, Lambert.
First and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Moving on to financial reports. Present transit revenue and expenditure report. I'm assuming that's you, Jesse?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just highlight on a high level here. Things are generally on pace for what we expected for the year and what we budgeted for the year. I'll just highlight that there's a couple areas where we're probably going to see some savings. Areas like motor fuels, the third-party contractor, vehicle repairs and things like that. Obviously, with the changes that we've done, less mileage on the vehicles. We would expect by the end of the year that those will be a little bit less than we expected, but everything else should be generally on pace for what we're expecting budget-wise. So I would expect that we will still run a little bit short by the end of the year, but not as much as we were originally planning. And currently, the reserve balance is a little under 63,000. Would expect that to remain unchanged, and we'll get that into some more discussions when we get to the proposed draft cooperative agreements. But at this point, we would anticipate billing our cooperative partners for any shortfalls based on those agreements.
Any other further comments or questions on?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Go ahead, Mary.
are we 199.04? And that would show percent of the budget used?
No, ma'am. That is just for a change in the net between the revenues and expenditures.
What does it mean? Can you speak a little bit louder?
Absolutely. So if you look at it's a little bit tougher because it's a percentage on a difference. So if it flips, that number gets exaggerated quite a bit. When you look at the revenues so far for the year, we're at 63% of the revenues. Expect that's based on a budget of the numbers that we've gotten from like MnDOT and stuff like that. So mostly that'll be pretty close with the exception of fares. Expenditures, like I mentioned, that should also be pretty close by the end of the year with the exception of some savings. Right now it's at 53% of the year, but that'll eventually get caught up. In general, those numbers should be pretty close, but the reason why the expenditures are so much lower on a percentage compared to the revenues is because we are behind on billing. So like fuels, we're 2 months behind on billing. The third-party contractor, we're about 2 months behind on billing. And that's kind of typical for us. The previous month, it takes them time to prepare those invoices to us. We review them. We usually don't end up paying them until maybe 2 months later. So the expenditures are always kind of catching up. So that's why that's a little bit the difference between the two. So no, we are not 199% above our expected revenue versus expenditures. So,
Mr. Chair, excuse me, but what are then the total functions unclassified. That again show the 199.04.
I think that's just a percentage, Mary. I think the column left of that column does a better job of explaining where the budget is, if I'm correct, Jesse, because that shows that we're at $1 million something in revenue and just under 900,000 of expenditures, so we have 136,000 ahead on the budget at this point in time.
That is correct. But like I mentioned, because we are a couple months behind, it's not really 136 ahead. Once you catch up those billings, it's not going to be there.
Thank you.
What's the date of this billing cycle? Does it say at the top there, or the financial report?
This is as of the end of September.
Okay.
But again, I believe August billings is not included in here, and September's. So there's a couple months of missing information that's not reflected in this.
Any other comments or conversation regarding revenue expenditure report? If not, moving on to transit operating statistics, and I'm assuming that's you, Crystal.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The operating statistics, I provided a comparison of September of '23 versus September of '22, as well as I included in the packet January through September of 2022. And to compare, I also included January through September of 2023. Just some notes are passenger counts for September of 2022 compared to September of 2023. It does show a decline in ridership. However, what it doesn't show is that Pine River was eliminated, and also Crow Wing County eliminated a portion of their services. So the decline in ridership was to be expected. The revenue did have an increase, and that was to be expected as well with the fare increases. And another item I'd like to point out in the statistics is the no-shows. I know member Doug Stenberg had brought up the no-shows. And if you look at September of '22 versus September of '23 no-shows, they drastically dropped because the third-party contractor is enforcing that policy now. So that's a good thing. A lot less wasted trips, and we're working with our passengers more closely on following the operating policies. And then I also did want to point out, just looking at September of '23's, we are still getting new customers. We had 30 new customers set up just in September. So are there any other questions from the members for me?
Where are you finding the new customers primarily? Is there a percentage higher in Brainerd, the county, Baxter, spread throughout? What is it?
Typically Brainerd and Baxter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on transit operating stats?
Well, I guess I would ask more on I don't think it shows up in statistics, but we've had our county fare implemented as of September 11th, so just over a month, correct?
Correct.
And then the city started on their $3 fare increase. Was that in August, I believe?
End of August, August 21st.
Okay. Has the transit department or engineering, Jesse, heard many concerns about the increases, whether it's county, city, of Brainerd, or Baxter? Has that been emails, comments?
Not typically directly to me, third hand. So I've heard from the county that they've gotten a couple comments about the increase. I've heard from Baxter staff that they've gotten a couple comments. But that's also kind of where we direct them when they call and they're upset about the fare increases. We kind of direct them to both the county and the city of Baxter as they make the decision on their fares. So we do direct them that way. But generally, I have not received a lot of direct stuff from me. It's been third hand through the other entities.
So then going from the 2 1/4 in the city of Brainerd exclusively, we haven't heard much concern raised about going from that price to a $3 fare
I haven't. I don't know if Crystal has, but I haven't personally.
I haven't. Most of the concerns have been Baxter and Crowing
Okay.
due to the larger percentage increase in their fares from what they were at.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair and Jeff, I've had quite a few complaints about it, but I think it's misinformation. Have we done any paper or anything on, they're talking, everybody's saying that it's $8 in Brainerd. I said, I don't think it's $8 in Brainerd. So there's a lot of misinformation or,
Weekly, we do post on social media, the city of Brainerd, for public transit. We just call it Transit Thursdays, and I post tidbits about transit with facts like fare information or policy information or our schedules, things like that. As for when the fares were approved to be increased, it was published legal notice, I believe, twice. And I think it was 60 days we gave for each operation. Or 30 days. I think it was a little bit more for the county, because originally we were the county had a bit more time on their information, and the county, actually, we came up with a whole week worth of facts and information that we posted on social media to get out there. Dispatch is obviously letting people know what fare they will owe when they call in. But that is something I can take into consideration to try and clear that up and do some more pointed posts about what Brainerd's fare is.
right, and it's, social media would not be proper way for the person that I'm thinking about.
Correct. Yeah, yes, I understand. That's why we used the paper, we used social media, and then obviously dispatch. I'm not sure where that information came from. County fares went to $8,
yeah.
so
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
thank you.
Mr. Chair, I think the thing that everyone has to remember is that the increased costs are real. The only question is who should pay for them. That's the only question. And I think people should pay who use the service. So, I mean, that's, nobody likes it. I don't like it when I pay all the money I do for gas or anything else, but that's life. So, I think we've got to hold tight. Are we making it? Are we paying our way now as far as revenues and expense?
It's tough for us to say because we just implemented a lot of those changes, and like I said, we're still behind on the billing cycles. So it'll be tough for us to say until closer to the end of the year, but we will continue to evaluate it and watch it closely.
Okay, thank you.
There's nothing else in operating stats, then doesn't look like we have anything under unfinished business, so I think I can skip ahead to new business, and it looks like we have comprehensive review results.
Yes, I can take that, Mr. Chair. Jesse and I, and also the finance director, met with our auditors back in end of August and spent a couple days with them. The auditors reviewed every piece of transit, financial management, program management, our policies, our maintenance, procurement, just anything that you can think of that makes the agency run. They looked through it all and made sure that everything was running efficiently and properly and appropriately. There was just a few findings. For the most part, they were all advisory recommendations or best practice items that they found and made recommendations to us to change. We are waiting still for their final, what was that called? Their final report. Once their final report is sent to us is when basically the clock starts ticking. We have from, I believe it's 6 months on some of the simpler items, such as like policy updates, to address and change. And those items will be simple to update. And then some of the more in-depth items, which were more related to like the financial management. They gave us a year. However, those were mostly advisory recommendations, so we have a year to kind of look into it and try and do more best practice items. Obviously, the findings is quite a long document, so I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but if anyone would like to ask me more questions about any of the items, I can answer.
I don't have any specific questions, I guess, in any specific areas. My question is more general, and as changes are made and things are starting to be adjusted, are they gonna come back to this advisory board for review?
Yes, of course, Mr. Chair. My plan for the policy updates is to hopefully have those done by the next meeting, the next TAC meeting, which I would expect should be January-ish timeframe. So I expect to have the policy updates all completed by then. And there's actually a couple items that I've already completed, such as updating our website. It's just some of the simpler items that should be on there. They're just best practice ones too. They weren't ones that I would be made to change. I just took their best practice ideas and put it out on the website.
We'll have a couple items on this agenda that address a couple of these
I
findings.
did see that, yep.
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yep, go ahead, Jeff.
I think this is I recognize that there's a couple of recommendations related to this. However, at the same time, there is one item on here that really concerns me that I think it's more a recommendation, it's advisory, best practice, whatever you want to call it. It has to do with mobility devices, I think they say in there. I apologize, if somebody could find that where it talks about mobility device and asking somebody to move to a secure seat if the driver cannot fasten that device, such as a wheelchair or a cart of sorts.
Yeah, I remember seeing that
Yes.
as well. I think it's
Item 14.
14, yep.
Okay, so, okay, so can everybody read that, so we all, I've read it a couple of times, so it's not too long. I'd just like to make sure everybody,
I can read it if you'd like.
okay,
Jeff.
if you don't mind, just read it.
So it's under deficiency, it says the operating policy includes coverage for areas addressing personal care attendants, PCAs, mobility aids, and wheelchair securement. These policies need slight adjustment in order to be fully compliant. I'm assuming that's compliant with ADA? Is
So,
that-
Mr. Chair, if I can help you with that one.
Yep.
So our current policy is written that it says it requires them to do that. And to make it compliant with ADA, it can only be recommend. So that was what they requested us change, is to recommend that they move to a fixed seat, but we can't require them to.
Got it. And then furthermore, Jeff, just for the sake of finishing out that area, it says, A, the PCA policy can only require passenger to have a PCA on board the vehicle when the only other option would result in a denial of service to the passenger. B, a passenger can request to move to a fixed seat but cannot be required to move to a fixed seat in the event that mobility device cannot be secured to satisfaction of the driver. And C, the use of a wheelchair lift and securement policy must all passengers the decision to board the lift facing the vehicle or facing away from the vehicle.
Okay, so the item there was B regarding the securing the device, okay? What I understand they're saying there, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if the driver cannot secure that device, they have to let them sit there in that device. Is that correct?
We can recommend that they move to a fixed seat, but we can't require them to.
Okay, so if the driver cannot secure that device, they then have to transport them in that chair, which is not secure, whether
That-
we want them there or not.
That is their option. So that's
Okay,
kind
so-
of part of the ADA
So how is that
compliance.
safe for other riders on the bus? Or the driver, if that device is not secure? See, that's my issue here.
Might not be, but if that's the ADA compliance, then I think that's,
I don't really
Except
care.
for a
I don't really
legal
care
issue.
about the ADA. I don't care about the ADA. If I'm on a bus or somebody's driving that bus and that device is not secure, do you realize the risk there is if there is an accident? That thing is a torpedo all of a sudden when you're going 5 or 50 miles an hour, whatever it might be, and that thing is not secured. I don't care what it is. It's going to be hazardous as all get out. And if we want to operate a bus because the ADA says we can't refuse them a ride because we don't feel safe with their mobility device not being secured, I don't, can't we say no? We're just not going to follow that? What are we risking here? That's the problem I have.
Well, it's probably a lawsuit for not following the ADA, Jeff. I think this probably has to be kicked back to insurance and attorneys if we want to make any kind of stand on this. I don't, in good conscience, feel like I can make a decision without hearing ramifications from them.
Can't we require that the device be secured?
That's what they're saying, Mary. They're saying we can't do that.
Why not?
That's the ADA. I don't get it.
Doesn't make sense.
That's my point. It doesn't make any sense. We're supposed, if you got, I don't care what the ADA says in this particular instance, because you're risking people's injury with that device. There's very heavy, large, whatever you want to say. If a bus gets into an accident or stops quickly or anything, that thing is loose. It isn't secured. Think about that. And that's where I don't know if this is an advice, if it's a mandate. That's what I'd like to know.
I'm gonna pause this for a second.
Yeah.
Crystal has her hand up here.
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I can, as I had stated in the beginning here, the final review has not been provided to us. And what I can do is take these concerns back to my project manager on this specific number 14 and discuss those concerns with her. And then I could bring that information back to you all, to all the members at the next meeting, or provide them to you in an email once I've had a conversation with her about that. 'Cause I understand the concerns, definitely.
My question would be, when someone comes on with a wheelchair, are they asked if they want it secured? Does the driver say, we'd like to secure this, or if not, why don't they just secure it?
This has to do with the not being able to do it. Sometimes they can't fasten is that correct, Crystal? There's limitations sometimes on the securement device that's on the bus or the way it may have to connect to that device.
That is correct. Well, that is a very, very rare circumstance.
Why don't we see what other places do who have a bus? When my husband was in the nursing home in Little Falls years ago, and occasionally we used their bus, which was a city bus, to take him, like he had to go to a podiatrist, he had a lot of trouble with his feet and such. And I recall very, very clearly that when he went up that ramp and got on the bus, the driver got down on his knees and secured that wheelchair. We weren't asked. We weren't asked. They just did it. And I think that is what should be done.
That's because transit requires us to do that, correct?
That is what we do, correct.
Right. The state, I think, says these are some things you have to do if you're going to provide transit. You have to secure devices. We're talking about very, very few exceptions, but it's those one or two exceptions that can cause us a problem. And I don't want to be on a bus if that, whatever it may happen, you can get hit in a bus from any direction, literally, and that's going to send something virtually any direction. And when you have people on a bus and even the driver, I don't know well, let me ask you this, Crystal. If we made a motion saying that we were in favor of this, I understand you're going to go talk to our project manager, okay? But is that going to change anything with the ADA?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Doug.
I used to drive and I used to be in the in like Crystal's position. When I drove, we were always taught by ADA that mobility device had to be secured. It had to be. Where our problem lied was scooters and having people sitting on scooters once we secured the device, because it was harder to secure the person on a scooter. So that's basically where we had problems. But I was always on, and Crystal, you can go back and you can look at this wording. This wording might not be what ADA says, according to what whoever inspected. But my understanding is that ADA always required them vehicles, or them chairs, mobility devices, to be secured. And they even go into how, 3 points, I think it was 3-point securement. We do 4 with straps, but scooters sometimes are 3 because the way that neck is. So if you go back and look at the ADA reg, I'm sure it explains that these devices have to be secured. And I don't think it's up to the driver whether he decides he wants to secure it or not. He has to secure it.
So I'll clarify, if I may, really quick, Mr. Chair. The conversation with MnDOT was more of along the lines of, if you have somebody come on that bus, and for some reason, the very rare case that you can't secure that chair, and let's say they are confined to that chair, in MnDOT's mind, with the money that we get from the federal government, we aren't able to deny them a ride because we weren't able to secure that chair and then force them into a fixed seat. So from that perspective, they said, you can't deny them that ride and kick them off your bus. So that was where their reservations are. Again, we'll reach back out to them and see if that's something that we can require in there, or if there's just no flexibility, and what that means if we don't revise that. If there's a compliance issue with ADA, if that means some sort of penalty or what that means, but I know we'll reach out to them and find out what our options are.
Yeah, I think getting more information from the program manager and some of that needs to happen, I think, before we can make any kind of real decision on this. At least that's my feelings on it.
Well, if there is an upside to this, this is a very rare instance where this type of thing may happen, but it's just, it seems counterintuitive to the whole thing about safety. And whether somebody's gonna ride and they're in a mobility device that can't be secured, and they're just, yeah, fine, I'll sit here and take my chances. And it's not just that individual that's taking the chance at that point. That's where I'm coming from.
Yep.
It's kind of like we can't make people put a seatbelt on. All we can do is ask them and recommend that they do that. So that goes right back to that. Same kind of thing. So that's all I got to say.
Mr. Chair, I would like to suggest that we ask the staff to write or notify the state about this situation and ask them for a legal interpretation of our responsibilities. Then we'll have something in black and white that we can hang our hat on.
Was that a motion?
I think
Well, I'll make a
that's
motion
what we had kind
to
of
that
asked
extent.
Jesse and Crystal
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah, we did, yeah, we have asked.
I think that if we need a motion, we can certainly do a motion. Otherwise, we'd already
Want a
kind of,
motion or not?
I don't know if we really need.
Do we not need one, Crystal? Okay, go ahead then.
They're already on it and kind of, we've given that direction, and this isn't any finalized policy at this point. So I think if we get to that policy and this is still an issue, then we'd look at that.
Well, it'll make the city safer if we have something from the state about our requirements on that, so. A subject to a lawsuit,
You know,
I hope.
Anything else on comprehensive review and the results?
overall, Mr. Chair, overall, was the review more positive than negative?
Yes, yes, it was, I would say it was very positive. We did very well. I was told that, ours was, I don't know what, just 2-3 pages. I was told that most agencies had, not to throw them under the bus, but they had like 15 pages. So I think we did, well, as you can see, there was at least 7 subjects where there was absolutely no deficiency found, not even one. So, and the ones that were found, there was just a couple, and most of the deficiencies were just advisory recommendations. So just to update for best practices. So they said we're doing really well.
There was one, I'll call it major issue that they had with our service, and we'll get that in an item later on.
Good. All right, I think I'm gonna move us on then to approve operating policy updates, and that looks like it is Crystal again.
This goes off of just the last item in the agenda. Is that what was next? Sorry, I'm trying to find it here. Okay. Get to my right page. Sorry about that. Okay, so this goes back to the comprehensive review findings. There was some operating policies that they found that they made recommendations that we update. 2 of those I did include in this packet here, and I am recommending authorization from the TAC members to update these policies. The one policy is our advanced notice policy, which currently states that dial-a-ride trips can be scheduled up to 45 days in advance. I am requesting for approval to remove the up to 45 days in advance and replace that with in advance and can run until canceled by the rider. The reason behind removing the up to 45 days in advance is that it really restricted our riders from being able to schedule. It really wasn't an item that worked for the riders or for our agency. Most, like school, they know their schedule all year long. To have them call back every 45 days was really inconvenient. Same with PA. They know their schedule. Same with general public going to work. They know their schedules. So this just opens it up and makes it easier for our riders. The other item was our subscription trip and standing orders. It had a piece in there where it said subscription service may be at a premium fare. And subscription trips, standing orders is where you have a reoccurring trip, like if you called and gave me your work schedule. As for the premium fare, it wasn't something that was really used in the past. And it's also something that the auditors said that we cannot upcharge people for those standing order trips. So it's something I'm requesting from TAC if I can update that policy and remove that premium fare piece. And with that, are there any questions or comments for me?
Do you like this in one motion per numbered policy or just one overall?
Just one overall, I think, would be fine.
I would move
Thank
to
you.
accept staff recommendations on these 2 policy updates.
Lambert, second.
Got a first and a second. Any further discussion? Not, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to fuel sales agreement with Crow Wing County. Jesse?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just quick introduce this. If you remember, about a year ago, we entered into an agreement with Crow Wing County for a fuel sales agreement that allows us to use their fuel tanks over at the county shop here. Included in there was a 10% overhead fee that hadn't been previously charged. We were estimating at that time the savings was still going to be roughly about 25 cents per gallon. Something that we've continued to monitor and review, and we found that unfortunately the savings is not quite as much as we were expecting. It's roughly about 10 cents per gallon. It's a little bit tough to get that nailed down perfectly because obviously throughout a month, gas stations change. Even within town, they're different. So it's really tough to get a good average. But just using like AAA to get an average is kind of something that we can do. We find that what we're getting billed versus like AAA, it's roughly about 10 cents per gallon. and we really only have the one county shop fuel station that's accessible to us. There's one in Cross Lake that is obviously very far out of the way, and then there's the one at the highway shop over by the airport, which is for the most part pretty out of the way for our buses to use. So really, we only have the one unleaded fueling station. The one thing that we've also found is that there have been times where that pump has been unavailable, and then they have to go to a commercial site and fill up, and it just becomes more of a headache for us to track those expenses because they come through a different direction. After a year on this with the costs, I think we want to recommend an alternative option for our transit buses. The city does use WEX cards for fueling for the rest of our entire fleet. That's police, street and sewer, pretty much every other city vehicle, which we can use at pretty much any commercial gas station. And then depending on where you go, at certain locations, you actually get a rebate back in your monthly billing. It's not a big rebate, but it is a rebate. But it gives us an opportunity to be able to fill up in a lot of different places. So let's take a bus that's maybe making trips in Baxter. This allows them to find a convenient location in Baxter instead of having to come all the way back into Brainerd, into central Brainerd to fuel at the county shop. So there is some extra savings that way by switching over to a WEX card and using commercially available gas stations versus restricting ourselves to just the county station. So actually, we're recommending terminating that fuel agreement and just moving on to WEX cards for our transit program.
Mr. Chair, do we need a motion? I'll make a motion to follow staff's recommendation to terminate the Crow Wing County fuel sales agreement.
I'll second.
First and a second, just for further discussion, so I was looking at, there was 37,000 something miles from the first of the year to this year. What's a bus get miles per gallon? 10?
Or 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
10 to make the math easy. So 3,700 gallons, 10 cents per gallon. So what are we talking dollars wise?
$370.
Right. But again, there'll be some savings between the little bit of rebates and then the convenience of not having to drive.
Less mileage and less fuel used by not having to bring the bus all the way back into town. It can fuel up where it's at instead of driving across town to fuel up.
All right, thank you. We got a first and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. That passes. Draft cooperative agreement with Crow Wing County and Baxter. Whose point on this?
It'll be mine, sir. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. The transit service, with the changes that we went through this last summer, we knew that we were going to have to relook at our agreements. Some of them were kind of old and outdated anyway, so we felt that this was a really good opportunity with all these changes to really take a good hard look at our agreements and make sure that, one, we bring them up to date, but also that they're reflective of our current service after the changes. So in this, generally, some of the things are similar. We did make some changes. One thing we specifically made was a kind of a sunset on these agreements before they would run indefinitely until canceled. In this version of the agreements, we have essentially a 3-year term of agreement, and we time that out very specifically to run in concurrence with our third-party contract. And we felt the reason to do this is for twofolds. One, when we get the bids for a third-party contractor, when those contracts come due, we can review the service and then review that with our cooperative partners at that time and make sure that their fares are indicative of the expenses we're expecting. But on the other side of that, I apologize, I completely lost where the other part of that was. the share of expenses, it gives us an opportunity to look at the previous 3 years of expenses and make sure that the percentages are also indicative of what we're really seeing, rather than just staying with the same assumption that the percentage of expenses is the same for the next 20 years. So this just gives us an extra opportunity to relook at these things and make sure everything is generally meeting what the current standards are before we reissue the new agreements. So that was a big change there, is changing the term of agreement. And then obviously the other big change is the local share of transit costs. So this was something that we took a lot of time to think about. How do we do the share of expenses for the 3 remaining cooperative partners? Obviously, with the removal of Pine River, who had a 7% share before, needs to be absorbed by the other 3 partners. And then obviously with the county significantly reducing their service, wouldn't necessarily be fair for them to continue to operate under the assumption that their share of expenses should stay the same. So what we ended up coming up with is looking at a projected fuel cost share. So what we used is the same projections that we did in spring, projected ridership, projected routes, and how much expenses we were expecting that way, and taking that percentage and splitting up the system that way from what we were expecting. Unfortunately, we don't have a history after these changes to really base anything off of. So again, it's like when we did everything else, it was off projections and what we were expecting to do. But that's the other part of the benefit of keeping a 3-year sunset, is we can take a look at it again and make sure that everything is generally what we're expecting. But that was the best way that we could come up with splitting the expenses, is what we expected fuel costs to be. Other than that, most of it is generally the same. We did have the city attorney review these as well. He had a few pretty small comments in there, but we did revise it based on his comments. And should the TAC approve these, we would bring these to the city council for approval before bringing these to our cooperative partners for their review as well.
Thank you, Jesse. Any comments
Yeah.
from the board?
I'm just not sure of the formula you used. You talked about, all I heard you say was fuel costs, based on the percentages on that. Did ridership play a role? Anything? I missed something?
Yes, sir, it did. Ridership was part of that formula. I'd have to pull it up to know exactly how it all factored out, but it was ridership by an average mileage,
Okay.
and then miles per gallon average per bus, and then factor that out into a dollar amount. So obviously, because Brainerd has a majority of the ridership, that number goes up quite a bit because we're driving around a lot more. But because it's less miles, it factors itself out a little bit between us and the county. So that was the way we did it, is ridership, projected ridership, times the average trip length, I guess let's call it, and then miles per gallon. We did that for Brainerd, we did that for Baxter, and then we also did it for Crow Wing, knowing that we were going to do essentially 2 trips each way, each community per day for 5 days. That one's a pretty easy one since we're not going all over the country. We're going to 2 locations, so we were able to figure out that mileage pretty easily. But again, that's also going to potentially change too as we continue to run that county service and see how that continues to work out. But again, this gives us an opportunity to review these things after a few years.
Okay, what about, say, in a year? If both parties agree to this, county and Baxter, and let's say in a year, after we've established the new fares and perhaps even a new contract with a third-party provider, and we see numbers are different considerably on one end or the other regarding these 3 entities, are we locking ourselves in to be covering more of the cost, or either Baxter or Crow Wing County having a higher cost or lower cost than what the actual services they're getting, or the city of Brainerd, perhaps, based on sticking to this for
Potentially.
3 years?
Correct, potentially, and that was the challenge of this, is even come June, we're not even going to have a full year of these changes implemented, so it was going to be very difficult for us to really discern the exact share of those expenses without a full year of
Could we put something in
experience.
there to say we review this after the, say, after a year of this being agreed on, say next October?
Well, and just to chime in a little bit too, Jeff, don't we have our third-party contract RFPs going, don't we have to discuss that at some point in the next year?
In the next months,
Yeah.
The-
Well, and like,
few months?
At our next TAC meeting, definitely.
This
Yeah.
contract ends at the end of June, this
Yes.
upcoming June. But that's what I mentioned is even at that point, we still won't have a full year of the changes to reflect on.
But what we're talking about here is their local share, so.
Correct.
That's the percentage. The dollar numbers aren't necessarily relevant. You're paying a percentage of whatever that local share is. So that, I mean, so if we get a higher contract or a lower contract, the local share is still gonna be a set amount. So I'm talking about the percentage that each entity is paying into. It's not gonna be, it's not necessarily relevant. I mean, I get, we're doing it based on today's numbers, but I'm saying that if in a year, is that, no?
No, I understand what you mean. You're,
Okay.
you're talking relative to itself.
Right.
Contract doesn't matter, $1 or $10, the
Right.
percentage is what matters.
It's the percentages, right? So,
I think in my mind, this contract should be reviewed after we finalize third-party contracts for the service provider would be kind of the interval I would foresee it.
we have to talk about the local share. That's everything that the federal and state money does not pay for. So
Correct.
it's a separate item than the third-party contract. The percentages are what they are. If we lock into this today, it's for 3 years. This also is the same percentages, whatever the new contract is, higher or lower or the same. So that's what I'm talking about. Are we doing the right thing by setting this percentages today when we don't know what the numbers are next year at this time? Or 2 years at this time? We're locking it in. That's what we're saying. We're gonna agree to this for 3 years, actually almost 3.5 years, over 3.5 years.
Well, we're not,
Go ahead, Jim.
I'm sorry.
Nope, you're fine.
Well, that was my question. That's what we're doing, correct? If we agree to this and the other entities agree to this, then we have these percentages locked in for the next 3.5 years.
Other than it's contingent on the state providing 85% of the total operation.
But we still pay the local share. So whatever that is, these
The
are
other
the percentages we're
15%.
agreeing to.
So, Mr. Chair, so if I understand this, 17% of the expense is going to be charged to the Crow Wing County, right?
18 to Baxter.
And 18 to Baxter. Now, if we do a 3-year contract with the third party, we can reflect any changes in this policy? Because this is just a policy, isn't this? I take this as just a policy, or this is agreement?
Well, I would believe, Mr. Chair, it is an agreement. And I think probably Jeff's concerns are valid, but there is a termination clause at the end of this, and one could always terminate it for the purpose of reviewing and negotiating a new policy. And that might be the way to go, because I don't know how we'd agree upon a appropriate percentage. Is maybe 17 is too much, maybe it's not enough, I don't know. But until we perhaps have a new contract and get into it, we won't know. But the termination clause at the end would allow either party to terminate for the purpose of renewing and reviewing and renewing, right?
That's a very good point. So I think, if you don't mind, Mary, I'm glad she reminded me of that. Thank you. So maybe what I would like to see is that we review this, perhaps is a better way to do it, after, say, by the end of next year or sometime by the beginning of 2025, to make sure that these numbers are, we're asking each entity to provide their share of the local match based on the service that's being provided for each of their own individual entities. So whatever those percentages are right now, if there's more service see if there's more riders in the county, that's a part of the equation, using riders, right? And they collect fares for those riders, so we have to look at this, I think, and say, is Brainerd 65% of the local share? Is that fair for all parties once we establish more of a ridership numbers, fuel usage, all those things combined? That's what is that something you see we could do perhaps after
Of course.
it's underway? Okay.
Mr.
That's
Chair.
what I'm concerned about.
All right, Mr. Chair, why don't we just add a sentence to this agreement, that it will be reviewed annually by all affected parties. That way, we can always look it over, tweak it if we need to, or go on. Why not?
That's something our attorney would agree to, you think?
So just to clarify, it does have in under number 10, under reporting, that it does say we will provide annual reports on ridership information and information
But
to the
that doesn't
costs.
say we'll make any changes. Just says information. If you feel that's adequate, I'm not going to belabor the point, but, I think Jeff points out some reasonable expectations, and I think we all share that. We want to be sure that we're fair to the people of Brainerd as well as to Baxter and Crow Wing County.
Mr. Chair, my concern is this. We had Pine River contributing 7% of the local share, where that was never happening.
Yeah.
And we sat here and talked about this a couple of meetings in a row. This is what I'm getting at. How did that get established? It doesn't matter. It's done now. We established these numbers today. They're set in stone because providing the numbers on a monthly basis does not review the formula that's used. That's what I'm talking about. The formula, not the numbers. So if the numbers change to where our formula is now not adequate based on how you determine that today, does that make sense?
Yes, sir, Mr. Member. I'll clarify, if that's the direction of the TAC, we can definitely come through and review this after a year. And if we find that the numbers are significantly enough out of whack that the TAC wants to take a look at this agreement again, that is, again, to Mary's point, something that we can invoke a termination clause and review those numbers again. I don't know if there's value in including a 1-year review period in the agreement necessarily. But we do have that opportunity with the termination clause that we can reserve our right to come through and terminate these agreements and draw up new ones if need be.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for understanding on my part. This agreement, in June, we have bids go out for a third party. June of next year, correct? 24.
February, the
February,
proposal
okay.
period would open, yes.
So we do this now, what benefit is it if we don't? Why do we go to the 2027 if we're going to could possibly change third party?
This is the local share, Jan. This is what this is referring to, the local share.
Oh, okay.
Whatever the government funding doesn't provide, it's up to the local share to provide.
Okay, sorry, thank you, thanks. Never mind. Disregard
Believe
it.
me, this does get a little confusing. I totally get it. It's not black and white necessarily.
So I think what I've heard after all the discussion is reporting's gonna happen quarterly, annually anyway. If we're reviewing stuff and the numbers do not look to match up with the local share transit cost in number 8, then I think we could ask Jesse and Crystal to have discussions with those partners, and if they're not wanting to adjust the agreement, then we could invoke the termination clause in number 12. Would that be accurate?
I think so, yeah. I think, Mr. Chair, the only suggestion I would make on all of that is that included in number 10 as the last sentence would be, review of all pertinent information shall be done annually. That way it doesn't slip through the cracks. You're looking at it every year. If Crow Wing or Baxter had an issue, we could talk to them, but if people don't think that's necessary, I'm okay with that too. Just want to cover the bases.
And it does note annual reports, so if we want to make it a little stronger, we could, Mary. Otherwise, it does say annual in there. It does not say quarterly, I guess, like I had said.
Yeah, yeah.
Jesse, what was the one you said the reports are given out how often in there?
So it does say annual reports, and that's just annual reports to our cooperative partners. We still do come to our TAC with our quarterly
Right.
reporting.
I'm just concerned about the formula. We're setting the formula of 16, or 17, 18, and 65. That's what and that's about regarding specifically the local share of the formula used to determine how much each entity pays for the local share.
And I think that's very valid. I think that's a very valid
Just want to
point.
make sure we don't get, yeah, anyway, I set it up. I'd move to approve the two agreements, to move forward with them.
I'll second, Lambert, second.
First and second, any other further discussion? If not, all in favor?
I,
Okay, all opposed, same sign? All right, that passes. Moving on to changes to St. Francis Student Service.
Mr. Chair, did we just agree on Baxter and Crow Wing County or just Crow Wing County?
both of them.
The request was Baxter and Crow Wing together. Is everyone okay with that?
Mr. Chair, I'll just quick clarify, these both agreements will go to the Brainerd City Council first. My intention is the November 6th meeting, and I will share the tax wishes about that we do come back and review this after the new contract and after we've gotten a sufficient amount of time to review those percentages, and that the TAC would like to essentially let their partners know that if we see that there's changes needed, that if they're not willing to, that we would invoke that termination clause. So I'll include that as part of that discussion.
Very good, thank you, Jesse. Crystal.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and take this one. So this was kind of one of the, I know, thank you. This is one of the major items that was through the MnDOT comprehensive review. They had some concerns about the service that we provide to our St. Francis Catholic school children. The way that we provide the service with the memorandum of understanding and billing of the school for those student trips, in their mind, they felt that it was perceived to be a school bus service rather than what our current service of Dial-A-Ride is. So we had, I'll call it substantial and significant amount of conversations with the auditor, some high ups in MnDOT Transit, as well as our project manager about the St. Francis school service and how important it was for us to maintain that level of service for those students because they were a big portion of our county service, and to make sure that we're not making changes that would deter them from riding further outside of the changes that we've already implemented with higher fares. Ultimately, what we were able to find out that the way to get within compliance with what MnDOT sees would be compliant with the FTA and school busing would be that we would terminate the memorandum of understanding with the school. I'll back up. What it really boiled down to is that a third party is paying and invoiced for the students for their trips. So to resolve that, terminating the memorandum of understanding, we would still allow the children to ride back and forth, but ultimately it's an extra step for our staff. We would have to invoice and bill the parents directly rather than the school. How they pay for it from there is really up to them, but ultimately we can't bill the school for the students is what it boils down to. So again, it's actually just more staff time. Hopefully it's not more cumbersome for the parents to the point that it deters them from the service, but this would ultimately bring us within compliance of what MnDOT says that we would need to do to be compliant with a school bus service. So that is our recommendation, is that we eliminate the memorandum of understanding between us and the school. I will clarify that we have had conversations with the school about this, the principal of the school. They understand the situation and they are okay with us going the route we're talking about. And then we would begin quarterly invoicing the parents for transit services following that.
Mr. Chair, I think that's
Madam Mary.
a terrible idea. It would seem to me that's going to increase our costs significantly. And if someone doesn't pay, what do you do? Are you gonna, the city's end's going to have to go after them and after them? And I just said, why is that a requirement now?
And Mary, I was
Build a school.
kind of to your point to some extent. I was going to ask, are the quarterly billings prior to the quarter and before the rides are given, or after?
The quarterly billing is done after. So staff has to track each individual's trips multiple
Which
times
does
a
bring
day.
up the point, what if somebody doesn't pay? Would there be a way for payment to be prior to the quarter and you're still tracking, and then if they have carryover to the following quarter, they could use that? Just seems like a safer bet.
You're talking almost like prepaid trips.
Kind of.
The issue is a lot of those students are hit and miss with their rides. Some of them are a little bit more consistent than others. To your point, that is something that we contend with on a, I'll call it regular basis, but it's something that we have to watch is every time we send out an invoice, is it getting tracked and making sure that it is getting paid. The one thing that we do have control over is being able to provide the service. So if we do have an issue with a student that their parents aren't paying the invoice, we can deny those rides. I mean, if that's the case, but I don't anticipate that being an issue.
Oh, Mr. Chair, I see it says recommends. Does that mean that we have an option? If they just recommend it, that doesn't say they're mandating it. And if we don't have to do it, I don't think we should. I think we're going to lose money hand over fist. And it's going to take more time. You'll be in here asking for more help just to do that. I mean, who came up with this harebrained idea?
Mr. Chair, I think the money is gonna be the same, it's just where you're getting it from, you're not getting it from, I think the parents are paying the school and the school's paying us. In this case, we're just going straight to the parents. So the money is gonna be the same, it's just how it's being gotten. And I think the requirement's an FTA requirement, if I'm not mistaken, so technically you don't have a choice. We can't act as a school bus company.
Right.
Right.
And so I don't see an option in this.
And Mr. Chair, I think we've had this discussion where we were questioning whether this would be considered like a charter or a school bus. I mean, we've had this discussion before. So I think we like to do the service for the school, those kids.
Go ahead, Jesse.
I'd like to reiterate that we've had significant discussions with MnDOT regarding this and really, really pushed on making any changes to it currently, because we know that, one, it's more staff time, but we also know that we really don't want to make changes that would at all deter those students from wanting to ride. So we had a considerable amount of discussion, and ultimately MnDOT said this is your only option to be in compliance. But we went for quite a few different conversations. I know Crystal was in, I think, several hours of conversations with MnDOT on just this topic specifically.
Very good.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jeff.
are these riders that specifically go to St. Francis, are they getting notified of no-shows if they're scheduling a ride and they don't ride without cancellation?
Crystal?
They will be, yes.
They haven't been though, have they?
No, they have not been.
Okay,
Which would
should be.
probably make us operating more like a school bus.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve the changes. A second.
Lambert, a second.
Further discussion, we got a first and a second. Not all in favor,
Aye.
Aye.
I,
opposed, same
Aye,
sign.
I'm opposed.
That motion does pass. We're moving on to capital bus purchase. I'm assuming that's Jesse.
Yes, sir.
one
Thank you.
other, just if I may,
Yes, go ahead. Joe.
specifically to St. Francis. They're getting picked up in Pequot and Crosby, is that correct?
That is the intent. They have made some adjustments, at least some of the students have.
Right, but that's generally where they pick up and drop off?
Yep,
One location, right? Are they paying the county fare then?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to capital bus purchase.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So MnDOT has opened up the solicitation for bus replacement, their grant program for that. Something we typically do every year. We ordered one in 2020 and 2021, which we still have not arrived. We're expecting one to hopefully arrive in 2024, but it may be late 2024 for the first one, and most likely the other one in 2025. We did not order one in 2022. We had obviously concerns about the finances and wanted to review our finances before we went and ordered a new bus. However, as part of that financial analysis, we did include a bus replacement each year, knowing that our fleet is going to need replacement year over year. So we did include that in the projections and felt that we could include a replacement vehicle in each year with the fares that we were expecting to charge. So we're recommending going ahead and applying for the bus replacement solicitation. It is due to MnDOT on November 30th, so we would, or 13th. So we would bring this to the upcoming November 6th council meeting to get approval to submit for this grant. Most likely, we would not see this bus until probably 2026, unless for some reason they start getting much more caught up on their production levels. But we ultimately will not pay that local share until it is delivered. Right now, we're expecting that to most likely be somewhere in the realm of about $13,000.
Thank you, Jesse.
Mr. Chair, do we have that money? Do we have $13,000?
We do budget for a bus replacement, like you'll see in the financial report. We did have the dollars appropriated this year for a bus that we were expecting to get, but ultimately we didn't get one. So in that projections again, we are going to continue to budget for a replacement as we would expect one to continue to come in.
Jesse.
Mr. Chair.
And just to clarify that, Jesse, so the dollars are here, do they go into like a general fund with the purchase order that's already out in the bus and are drawn from later? Or do we need to keep budgeting for that?
So I believe those dollars would be carried through until we get the delivery.
Thank you. Jeff?
Mr. Chair, I was just doing some rough math based on the agreements we made with Crowing and Baxter. Our share in this would be about 8,000 of the 13, roughly. Theirs would be 17% of 13,000 and 18% of 13,000. So that's how our local share and what if both entities agree on the local share formula that we just agreed on, will we have that, or will it be our one we currently have before any of the other entities agree? Based on when we get the bus, right?
It's based on when we get the buses, when the billing comes in. Again, most likely, we're not going to see this bus till 2026. So we might have a different agreement in place by that time that goes around.
Thank you.
I would look for a motion if there's no further discussion.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Doug. I got a first. Lambert second. Any other discussion? Not all in favor?
I
All opposed, same sign. Motion
Serve
passes
yourself.
for capital bus purchase grant. Moving on to public forum, do we have anyone online? Looks like a no. Staff reports, Crystal.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had some updates I wanted to provide to the TAC members since we last met last July for our last meeting. As you saw on the agenda and we already reviewed, we went through our comprehensive review audit with some minor recommendations on that, which staff is working on. I also wanted to update the members that Blue Sky Transit, our third-party contractor, did hire a new on-site operations manager. His name is Aaron Sandbakken, and that was at the beginning of August, so it was right after we had met. They found a manager and hired him on. He has 20 years of maintenance and management experience. And just in the short amount of time that he's been here, he has improved many things. The call answered percentages are now at a 92%, which our minimum required is 85% for answering the phones. Right now they're averaging 92%, and they actually have many days of 100% of all the phone calls answered. This has never happened. It was 60 to 70% previous to him coming on board. He has turned the entire maintenance program around. All buses have received their PMs, whether it be a 5,000 mile or a 30,000 mile. He has stayed on top of the maintenance and continues to stay on top of that. Staff seems real happy with him as well. He is already given staff training, and his main focus currently, now that he's taken on all the issues and turn those around, is just creating some really good standards with customer service, professionalism, and data accuracy is kind of his goals right now going forward for the rest of the year. Upcoming projects that staff are working on is obviously updating those policies from the findings in the audit and some of the procedures, quarterly billing and monthly reporting. And then as well as everyone has noted, drafting and editing the request for proposal, the RFP, for the upcoming 2024 transit operating services. I expect at our next meeting to review a draft, and we'll go from there for the proposals. So it's coming up very quickly. MnDOT will be working with us a little bit on the edits as they normally do, and of course Mr. Dean will be assisting me with every page of it, luckily. Yes. Well, no, I won't need all that help, but we're going to do a lot of updates where hopefully with the next, not hopefully, the plan is with the next contract that staff has more, how can I state it? It was addressed at the last TAC meeting. We expect the RFP, the abilities to address the shortfalls will be included in the next RFP where they have not been included in the past. And then I just had a list of additional transit updates. I won't bore you with all the details, just kind of reminders of the fare increase dates that have happened. We continue to meet with ACOM, our consultant team. They are still compiling information to prepare a plan for us. I believe we are working with them through the spring of 2024 still. So still working with them. And I did submit the documentation required for our solicitation for grant funding for 2024, which was approved, and MnDOT is just finalizing our agreement, and I should see that shortly. And that's about it. Well, I do have one other piece, is that the Public Works admin person did leave, and we are in the process of finding a new staff member for Public Works to assist me with transit and all Public Works items. So that's part of everything that we're doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Any questions for Crystal or any other report outs from board members? If not, thank you, Crystal and Jesse. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
One thing, Mr. Chair, do we need to schedule another meeting?
Yes. I do not have a calendar up, but someone said we were in January for the next meeting, so.
Don't we have TAC member comments or questions at the end?
Yeah, it committee member reports is
Oh,
what it says, and I
okay.
asked if there was any. Does
Well,
it-
that was specifically for these two individuals, I thought you said.
No, they're staff reports, I think.
Yeah, okay.
And then it's committee member reports, which is us.
I just was giving you a hard time. Okay.
I think Crystal's looking at the calendar over there. Oh, we got one up too. I'd imagine 18th or the 25th. What's that look like for everyone?
Mr. Chair, if I can put a recommendation out there, I believe January 25th would allow us enough time to potentially put a lot of year-end numbers together. 18th would be really pushing us with only a kind of a week and a half before the packet goes out. But if we can do the 25th, that gives us at least a few weeks to put year-end numbers together.
When does the RFP go out? February?
End of January, early February, yep. So that would also allow us to get to the next council meeting.
And we're gonna go through that on one meeting? That's what you intend to do then if we go with the 25th of January?
Well,
Yes,
I think
sir.
historically we've scheduled a longer meeting when we've had to do those because this is, I think, the third one I've done.
Yeah, it's historically, we have taken quite a while, but that's okay. I just wanted to make sure we're
Crystal?
okay.
This would just be the review and approval to put it out for proposal. I think typically the multi-meeting is the review of the proposals received and then the scoring process.
Thank you.
If I,
Yes.
okay.
Glad you clarified.
We can do multiple meetings if,
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Not one marathon meeting?
no thanks.
Coffee and donuts or something?
Donut, okay, all right.
Okay, so January 25th, 2024, that sounds weird to say. And time, are we thinking 2:30 again?
Does 2:30 work for everybody?
Good
Okay.
here.
All right, so next meeting is scheduled. I didn't hear any committee member reports. Want to entertain a motion to adjourn?
So move.
A second by Mary. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned.